Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome to Richard Skipper Celebrates. I'm coming to you in glorious black and white today because we're going to be celebrating classic cinema through the eyes of James Cagney. But actually, I have two incredible women who pretty much, with everything going on in their lives, and trust me, they are two of the busiest people I know based on their bios, and they've devoted their life to James Cagney. Uh, I'm going to talk about an interview that I saw several years ago. And this interview was with William Shatner. And William Shatner was being interviewed by Larry King. And Larry King says, "What do you attribute to your success?" And he says, "I get out of the house." He said, "Everything that's happened to me is because I get out of the house." And that reminds me, last Tuesday night, I think it was Tuesday night, I was at the National Arts Club for David Fantle and Tom Johnson for their new book, Summer Stock, Come On, Get Happy, The Making of Summer Stock. And sitting right behind me was this incredible woman, Dayna DeCarlo. And we struck up a conversation, meeting for the first time, and she told me about this book, Conversations with Cagney. And I said, "You have to come on the show and talk about it." And she says, "Well, can my dear friend Lisa Sanita come on as well?" And I said, "Absolutely. The more, the merrier." So first of all, I want to thank you both for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you for asking
You're
us.
welcome. Nice to meet you.
You too. And I'll start with you, Dayna. I always begin my shows by asking who or what are you celebrating today besides James Cagney?
I think today, just being a caregiver, I take care of my 98-year-old dad. So every day that he's doing good and everything's fine is a good day.
I have
Um,
to tell you, I don't know if you watched it this afternoon, but I watched the Rosalind Carter funeral. And
mhm,
I cried and I cried and I cried. This woman devoted her life to caregiving.
yeah,
And she said, either you are a caregiver, you will become a caregiver, or at
yeah,
some point in your life, you're going to need a caregiver.
yeah.
And it's just an amazing, my hat goes off to you for the work that you do.
It's tough, and it's one of the toughest jobs you'll ever have to endure, especially if it's your parents. I've talked to so many people, and it's something that you are, you aren't. That's the whole thing. It's tough, and you have to do it. And that's,
Do you have siblings?
yes, I do.
Okay. Well, hopefully they're helping you too. But I know a lot of the work, and you're also a dog walker.
Yes,
So,
I loved animals. My mom had every pet going. My dad always said, if you don't take care of them, they're out. So we had gerbils, hamsters, rabbits, and cats and dogs, and you name it. And we took care of them. So it was easy for me to transition into this business because I worked corporate for many years. I needed to get out. It was just too much. So a friend of mine had a dog walking business, and she said, "Why don't you help me?" And I did, and it grew. And I started my own, and I do small animals. I don't just do cats and dogs, rabbits and ferrets and tarantulas, you name it, the oddest creatures. Let me tell you, snakes. I don't do. I don't. I don't touch snakes because you got to feed them, and I don't.
well, God bless you for all that you do. At least know what about yourself? Who or what are you celebrating today?
Just celebrating being healthy, happy and healthy. Everybody's good. We're celebrating that we're grandparents.
Yeah.
So we have a little granddaughter.
You're too young to be a
And,
grandmother.
thank you. So, but that's it. I'm presently working right now. I'm a TA in a local high school, and I've been in education for about 20 years. And I love working with kids.
Well, God bless you both for the work that you're doing beyond James Cagney. And we're going to get to James Cagney and all of that in a moment. But I want to know, first of all, how did the two of you meet? How did that begin to happen?
Oh, I think probably how many years ago? Like
Mm,
probably like 7 years ago.
oh,
Facebook.
9 years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
We were
Facebook.
on a Cagney page,
Oh,
and
it was Cagney that brought you together.
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so
I think on one of the pages, Dana had made a comment, and then we just started to communicate, and from there we found we had so much in common.
yeah, and we lived close to one another all our lives, which is very strange. And we both became a fan at 12. There were so many similarities between the both of us. We're both Italian, and same family structure and everything. And we lived close to one another, and we see each other for lunch every once in a while. So we keep in touch, and of course we talk to each other all the time. So it's just her and I. We were meant to connect. I don't know, fate or something, but Jim brought us together. That's the only thing I
That's
can.
great.
Well,
Yeah, it's great.
there's a long period of time.
Well,
It's the
I'm going
same.
to assume that I'm the oldest one here. I am a product.
Nah,
Well, I think so.
I
But,
don't think so.
but I am a product of 1960s and 70s television.
Yeah.
I grew up at a
Oh,
time
yes.
there were no DVDs, there were
Mhm.
no VHS tapes. These movies were shown on the Late Late Show. And I used to stay up to see these late, late shows. The first star that I met was Joan Bennett. Joan Bennett came to my hometown. She had a perfume line at the time. And my teachers, because I was a straight A student, they knew how much I love these old movies. They let me out of school so that I could go and meet Joan Bennett. And I walked in and I had a poster that was like the size of one of my walls. And it was Disraeli, and which was one of her earliest films. She, number one, was surprised that I knew who she was and that I had this love of films. And it breaks my heart when I hear some kids say today, not all, but some kids saying, oh, if it's a black and white film, I'm not going to watch that film
Yeah.
because I grew up loving these films.
Mhm.
Was it pretty much the same situation with both of you? First of all, in terms of the love that you had for these old films?
Well, I think for me, it was ingrained. My grandfather was in silent films. He made 4
Wow.
films. I can't find one. I've been in touch with so many people because they lost a lot in the fire. And he passed away a year before I was born. So I missed out on that. My grandmother watched Alfred Hitchcock, Sidney Greenstreet. I mean, she loved all like the English actors. My mom, of course, would sit me down. We watched all the classics, and I loved the movies. I just loved them. And even, every Friday we would go to the movie theater anyway. But I used to call them the old black and whites. And I didn't see a James Cagney film until I was 12. It was on 11:30 at night, and we weren't supposed to be up. And my sister, she's older than me, and we were supposed to go to bed at 11. And it was surprising. It was a Friday night. She was home. And we're laying there, and she says, Day, you up? And I said, yeah. She goes, let's go down to the kitchen and get something to eat. I wasn't hungry, so I went right to the TV. I opened up the TV guide, and Angels with Dirty Faces was on. It got 3 stars, and it said James Cagney, and I said, who's that? And I knew who Humphrey Bogart was, and I didn't know Pat O'Brien, and I read The Dead End Kids that I knew. In 1938, oh my God, the 30s is my favorite.
Right.
So I turned on the TV 11:30, and I was just mesmerized with this guy right off the bat. Now I had seen Claude Rains and Humphrey Bogart and Spencer Tracy, you name them. I have seen them up to 12 years old. I knew who they were. My friends were watching cartoons at the time. I knew all the actors. And Cagney he drew me in immediately. Just one film.
Now, I'm going to ask a question, and if it comes across as sexist, please, please, please forgive me. But as a young girl, I mean, were you a tomboy? What was it about James Cagney? Because obviously, it started off with a gangster film.
Yeah.
And, what was it? Was it, what was it about him that drew you into him?
You're still on me or Lisa?
Yeah, I think we were talking about this. We were talking about this just recently. It's inexplicable. You can't explain it.
Yeah.
It's just, and because we were young to even know who he, not that we knew who he was, but to be a fan of him. I mean, we were fans of other people too, but we don't know. We can't pinpoint it. It's just something that he had that was just lit up the screen.
Whatever it is, it's there. I learned something about myself thanks to both of you in terms of prepping for this show. I am a Cagnerd.
Yes. I told you, you're a Cagney for life.
That's it.
Yes.
You're it. You're it.
I too love all of his films, and we're going to talk about how you met him in just a moment. But my favorite film is Love Me or Leave Me. Again, he just comes across as such a nasty person, and yet in his eyes, you can see how much he loved her, Ruth Etting, and how much he really was wanting to help her. He went about it the wrong way, but that moment at the end of the film, I don't want to be a spoiler for those who haven't seen the film. If it's on TCM again, watch it, because that moment at the end of the film when she comes on and she sings the title song, it gets me every single time.
Yeah, there's another one of Jim's roles where he can play a rotten character, but you still like him.
Yeah.
You still like him.
You still root for him, no matter what. We know the things of the film, and we still say he still can get away. It's just
not many actors had that quality.
Yeah.
Well, growing up, I mean, unfortunately, my parents did not share the love that I had for these older films that I did. 1974, I was 13. This is something that David Fantle and Tom Johnson all have in common. That's Entertainment came out. And when That's Entertainment came out, it was a nostalgia craze and then all of the older films. And then I remember watching, like it was yesterday, the AFI tribute to James Cagney. But Dayna, your parents arranged for you to meet James Cagney. What was that?
They had no choice.
Can you tell everyone about the story about how you came to meet him? Because I love this story.
Well, after reading so many things, he was always in the paper, and we knew he had a farm in Martha's Vineyard and Dutchess County, but where? It was, Millbrook. He wouldn't really say. And one Saturday, I told my dad, I said, let's go up. And my mom used to go upstate around October-ish because she loved the fall and the leaves. So we always used to go up to Taconic for like an hour ride or something and stop off and eat. And so it was, my mother said, I'm coming. So I was like, sure. And my mom was my best friend too. So we got in the car and we just drove, and we ended up in Rhinebeck. And I said, we're too far. So we turned around and we ended up eating at this restaurant, and no one was there because it was like 11:30 in the morning. We were the first customers, and a guy come over and he took our order. And so my dad says, does James Cagney live around here? He says, yeah, he's right up the mountain. And he drew us a map and everything. So we go up there, and I could tell, I could feel it. We're getting closer, and we go in, and he wasn't there. He was filming Ragtime. We talked to one of the managers there, and he said, I'm sorry, he's in England at this time. So we waited till like the following year. We drove up, and this time we drove in and went right to the house. So I had brought him a palm tree because I wanted to give him something. He was diabetic. We could have brought him Italian food. He loved pastries and all that stuff, but I wanted to give him something. And I didn't even bring any photos for him to sign or anything. I just had my new camera, my Minolta XGA. And so we get there, and this woman comes out, and it was Marge Zimmerman. She was taking care of them at the time. So my dad turned around and said, Day, you're on. And I was 19. I got out of the car and I said, hello, Mrs. Zimmerman. And she just backed off like, who's this young girl? He knows who I am, And I told her my name, and she said, that's familiar, because I used to send them birthday cards and get well cards and stuff like that. So the name, I guess, she remembered.
Excuse me to interrupt. Did he respond to those cards when you were sending them?
Yeah, well, I wrote him after I saw Angels with Dirty Faces. I wrote him. The next morning, I said to my mom, I said, do you know who James Cagney is? And she said, of course I do. And she rattled off his name, all the movies. And I said, is he still alive? And she said, yes, he lives in Martha's Vineyard. Because at the time we didn't know he lived right upstate, an hour and a half away from us. I wrote him a fan letter, and 2 months later, he sent me an autograph picture. Then a couple years later, I wrote a poem. I'm not a poem person. I don't know what came out of me, but I wrote him a poem for his birthday, put it in a card, and he sent me another autograph picture. So, so when we were there, she saw my parents come out. My dad's very good looking and charming. And so she asked us where we were from. And I guess because of my age or something, she was just asking where we were from and stuff. So she just said, well, wait a minute. And she went in the house. We were still in the driveway. And then she waved us on. And she said, only two. So my mom said, I'll stay back. So my dad and I went in. I said, I have a palm tree in the back seat. And she goes, oh, I'll carry it. So we followed her.
You know what I'm thinking of right now, Mr. Roberts.
Yeah.
Mr. Roberts.
Palm tree.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we go in the house, and I'm last. So I could only see legs in front of me. And I'm thinking I'm going into the living room, but we went into his bedroom. He was sitting up in bed, and he had the TV at the end of his bed. And I felt so bad. I was like, oh my God, we're in his bedroom. Like, I really didn't expect that. But he saw the palm tree, and I had a note attached to it in case he wasn't there or whatever. He laughed. He thanked me. He had belly laughs. He couldn't thank me enough. And here I am, like, I couldn't thank him enough for all the enjoyment he gave me. And so Marge took the note off and read it to him, because he was hard of hearing. And he was like, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much. And my dad, of course, would say, Mr. Cagney, when you're on our TV, you control our whole house. And he went hysterical. He loved it.
If I remember correctly, you were 12 years old when you first discovered him on TV. You know, 19 years old, so a lot of time happens. Had you seen a lot of his other films in between?
Yes, but not the pre-code. They were very rare at the time. It almost was like when TCM came out in the 90s with Robert Osborne, he did a marathon. So my friend had TCM. We didn't have it. I gave her so many VHSs and said, tape them, because they were running 24 hours a day. So she taped like 20 something movies for me. And so I got to see a lot of the like early 30 movies that, you know, weren't on TV. TCM was like the movie channel until we finally, a few years later, cable, we got TCM. But
I want to shift gears for just a second, because there's another great book. James Cagney was my babysitter, and I had Ryan Cassidy, yes, of the Cassidys, everyone, on the show a few months ago.
yes,
And in the book, he tells the story about Jack Cassidy dropping him off to spend a day with, well, you both know the story, but for those who don't know, to spend the day with him. And of course, his image, Ryan's image of James Cagney, was the James Cagney from the movies. By the time he was meeting him, which was pretty much what your story is, Dayna, he was an older man. He had had his career that had all time had passed. What was it like coming face to face with your idol, and how did he measure up to that, or did you have a completely different way of looking at him?
Well, you know, it would have been easier if he was sitting in a chair in the living room. He was sitting up in bed. He looked fantastic, because the photos that were shown in the newspapers they weren't that great. He looked great. He gave such warmth to you. He drew you in. You felt comfortable around him. He didn't even know me, and he shook my hand, and I had a gold ring my sister gave me, a very thin gold ring. He shook my hand so hard he bent my ring. That's
Wow.
all. It was so He was so appreciative, and it was like, my God, this man, I just, he was more than I expected. It's just, I wish the situation was where he wasn't like in his pajamas in bed, because I wanted to give him such a big hug, but I would have to climb into bed.
And he could have had a grapefruit.
Would have been like, oh, okay, but no, it wasn't, that was not respectful. So, but when we left, Marge gave us the sign, so we left, and she came out and she gave me the biggest bear hug. She said, "You really pepped him up." And
Wow.
I said, "You made my dreams come true." And she said he even cried a little because he couldn't believe how young you were. Like, he thought, my age, we don't watch those movies or anything. And I got to know Marge Zimmerman. I met her like 3 other times, and we went back up to the farm. I met her. In fact, you mentioned Joan Bennett. I was at the National Film Society. Jim was supposed to get one of the Golden Awards. He couldn't make it. He had a stroke the day before. So I was there. Marge came in. She recognized me and said, "You have tickets." And I was with my parents. We were at the Sheridan in the city. And I said, "No, we weren't dressed. It was black tie, And she says, "Oh, no, Jim would want you to be there." So she goes, "I want 2 tickets on Jim Cagney, 3 tickets." So we went in. Joan Bennett was there. And at the end of the show, I got a program, and I met Joan Bennett through Marge Zimmerman. She was introducing me to all these people, Liza Minnelli and Martin Sheen, Joan Bennett. And Joan Bennett, she was so small. Oh my God, she was like barely 5 feet. Wasn't she little? Yeah, she was adorable. She was so happy. She signed my program and everything. And so everybody was worried about Jim that night because he wasn't there, But it was, Margaret Hamilton was there. There was a lot of people there. It wasn't on TV or anything. It was
No, in the early '80s, a friend of mine, I ran into a friend of mine on the street who worked at Lincoln Center, and they were honoring Billy Wilder. And he said, "If you want to go, I can give you a ticket, but the show's starting in 30 minutes." I was not dressed properly for this. It was like that moment, am I going to go or not go? And I decided to go. I was not able to enjoy myself because I was so self-conscious of I wasn't wearing shorts or anything like that, but I still was not properly dressed for the event. And it made me so uncomfortable.
It was, because I said to Marge, I said, "Look how we're dressed." My dad always wore a sport coat, and he always said, "You never know." He was so right, because he was dressed. I mean, it wasn't black tie, but he had a suit on. And I had the tablecloth kind of covering me. We sat in the back, and I was embarrassed. I wasn't dressed for the occasion. But
Lisa, I want to get to you for a moment. I mean, obviously, you met on this site dedicated to James Cagney. There are lots of people on the site. Lots.
Oh, there's
We've
met tons of people.
About the 2 of you that connected.
Yeah, because we had so much stuff in common that we just started to talk. And we found out we both became fans at like 12 years old. We both lived close to each other. And I was kind of a fan, but not until I saw the American Film Institute.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that show, I had a TV in my room, and I just said, okay, I'm just gonna, because we only had a few channels back then. It was on Channel 2, CBS in New York. And when I saw the film clips, they showed the montage of the film clips, I was mesmerized.
And 90 minutes. It was 90 minutes.
Yeah. It was 90 minutes, and I was mesmerized. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that he made those more of those films. Like, we were used to seeing, we saw Roaring Twenties, Angels with Dirty Faces, which were great. The typical classic ones, but Dayna said the pre-code movies we had never seen. So when I saw the film clips of those, I was, that was it.
Now, a lot of people, they think of James Cagney, obviously, as, the gangster. but he was also a song and dance man and an incredible dancer. I mean, he won an Academy Award for Yankee Doodle Dandy. When did both of you start becoming aware of that aspect of his career? Or was that interspersed with all of the gangster films that you were watching at the time?
Well, for me, I think like the third or fourth movie I saw of him was Footlight Parade. And I went, he dances? Oh my God. And was good. I couldn't believe it because the movies that I had seen were gangster movies, you know? And him, he was so graceful. And I wish he made more musicals because he was fantastic. I mean, he's in West Point Story. He's not tapping.
Mhm.
He's the musical that he did and the dance is incredible. He said it was one of his favorites other than Yankee Doodle Dandy. But I knew early on he was a dancer. And then plus I read everything I could on him.
I think that's what we had in common also. We read everything, anything that was published, newspaper articles, we cut them out. We bought all the books and
Scrapbook.
everything.
God. Yeah.
Are either of you responsible for starting the James Cagney page on Facebook?
Yes.
Yeah, Dayna.
Yeah, we decided to start our own. There's a lot out there and some are good. Some, don't know as much. And we participated, Lisa and I, a lot. And there's others, Greg DeVasco and Kathy O'Dowd and Stone Wallace, who was the other editor. There's a lot of experts that know a lot. And I figured, let's just go on our own. And I thought it was going to be just my friends talking about Cagney all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It just, and I was vetting people because it's private. And word got out, and Brian Cassidy, he's a member. David Fantle.
I got it now. I got up today, so I'm excited about that.
And we got a lot of family members too that are on the page, which is exciting.
Do you feel, and I'd like both of you to weigh in on this, do you feel that he is, that he gets the respect today that he should be getting as far as that era of films are concerned?
Well, I think that because there's a lot of fans on our page, they are totally in with all that. They know him and all that. But it's probably the younger generation who they don't know who those old actors are. So it's really the people are, even the people our age and older, we know all those old film actors and we were brought up on them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the younger people that are like, who is that? I've never heard of them. But
Yeah.
I think the fan base that we have is we try to post pictures that are not repetitive things, new things that or put things that postings that are new to people, information that's new.
Educate people. We get a lot of people that come in that are newbies and they're like afraid to ask questions, and you got to ask. It's like, that's how we started. It's not because we know everything. We don't know everything. There's a lot of stuff we don't know about. But it's a family because there's a group of us, about 8 of us from the page that we met. We went out to dinner, and then we went to the Cagney musical a couple times together. Robert Creighton.
Robert Creighton. Broadway, it's coming to Broadway. Do you all know this?
Yes.
And they've changed the title. The name of the new title.
Yeah.
World. Yeah. So we every couple times a year we do a Cagney gathering is what we do. And we would go to the city and check out the places he lived and different stuff like that. But to have dinner with people with just, we have a lot of things in common. And some are older, some are younger, and we're like family.
It's so much fun.
Oh, of course it is.
So much fun.
When I first came to New York in 1979, there were a lot of revival houses in New York. I remember the Regency used to do, from time to time, a James Cagney retrospective. When was the last time that either the Film Forum or any of these films have done a retrospective of his films? And if this is this something that the two of you have been involved with, or that you would be interested in getting involved with?
Go ahead, Day.
Well, the film forum had it. When was that, Lise? That was about 3 years ago. Because you had your daughter's shower. You couldn't make it. So was that 3 years ago?
Yeah.
They did.
2019.
Yeah, they had a lot of gangster movies. It was called Gangster Marathon or something. So there was a lot of Cagney movies, and a bunch of us went down and saw White Heat on the big screen. I mean, it was fabulous to see him on the big screen. That was unbelievable. Then there was one, the Lenox Hill in Yorkville. They had 3 days of his films, and I had called. Lisa found it, and I called a woman, and we chatted a little, and I just put it on the page. This is what's happening. Please come. It was free. You can donate, and it was kind of neat to be in a Lenox Hill neighborhood.
That's where they grew up in.
Oh, yeah. And because there was like every so many blocks, there was one for people, the kids, for school, sports, if they had trouble at home. It was like an all-in-one kind of thing, counselors and so forth. But the Barrymore Film Theater, we know Tom Myers. There was going to be a Cagney festival. Tom got ill, so it was postponed a little. And then there was, I guess, a lot of delays on building it. It's a beautiful building in Fort Lee. So eventually, hopefully, they'll do it. But yeah, like you say,
There's a movie theater in Fort Lee, by the way, and they're showing classic films.
Yeah,
They are, yeah.
yeah. I think they had The Wizard of Oz recently or something. We always thought about, a 3-day marathon and get the family. They would fly in, and it would be great. I mean, I just feel like sometimes, like you said, as far as him being respected, we know what he was and how many times he was robbed from the Oscar. But everyone always compares him to Bogart, and it's just not even close. But
apples and oranges. That's the way I feel about it. I want to talk about conversations with Cagney. First of all, how did this book come about? It's an incredible book, by the way. Congratulations to all of you.
All right. You're up, Lise.
So a few years ago, I'm always researching, and I found a blog written by this gentleman, Bill Angelos, and the blog said how he spent 6 weeks at James with Cagney at his home, upstate New York, because Martin Sheen hired him to interview Cagney because they were going to do a movie based on his life. So he went there for 6 weeks, and he had taped conversations.
Mm-hmm.
We got to read it, got in touch with him, got to read it. And then one day we read it and we were like, oh my gosh. Both of us together called him back and we told him, this is amazing. It was amazing because this guy, Bill, went to, was upstate New York, was driving along the road, went into one of those little stores and got what was a laser disc, went to Cagney's house, and they watched these movies together as he was roaming around, Stanfordville. So I read all about this, and I was like, oh my, I've never heard of this. So P.S. we're in the car, Dana and I, after we read it, and we're like, we told him, we said, this is amazing. And he said, what should we do with it? And we looked at each other and like, what, you should publish it. And he said, no, I don't think I want to do that. Yeah, right, Dana? And then
I'm working on something. I'm really not interested in doing it.
Yeah, he wasn't interested. So he goes, well, you guys can do it.
Yeah, we're like, oh my God, we never did anything like that. We're fans. And he said, no, I trust you both implicitly. And when he said
He
that,
knew we knew so much,
yeah, I knew that.
and we talked to him, and he knew that, we weren't
Yeah.
pulling his leg or anything. It was so. That's what we did. We got started, and we got in touch with a writer friend of ours, somebody in the group who was a
Stonewall.
professional writer, Stone Wallace, and that's what we did. We started on it, which was such a fun project. It was just.
Yeah, it was
I'm
actually,
curious, they say that when you've got too many cooks, it will destroy the broth. That's not the case here because the book is
everyone had their own skill. Like Lisa found it and we edited it and I took it apart and Stone put it, he formatted it for us. He was like, this is the title. So he had experience. He'd written 20 books at the time. And he's really a good writer too. He wrote a book on Joe Kraft, a biography of Joe Kraft. It's excellent. It's like, oh my God, you got to pick that up.
And this is only a portion of that whole time period that they spent. This was a small portion of it because the rest of it got lost or it was in a fire. Yeah. So there would have been so much more. But just the wording and the conversations, what they were talking about was just fresh information.
Yeah, like Lisa.
I've had so many authors on this show who have written books that have been published by Bear Manor Media. And they, how did, this was the first, was it Wallace that got you into the right hands? How did that all come about? And was it an easy book to sell?
And yeah, it was. Stone knew some of the publishers and we tried, nothing was happening. And he said, I know we can get it published for Bear Manor because he had previous books published by Ben. So he said, do you want to wait or do you want to just I said, no, Bill was 83 at the time and he was ill. And I said, no, let's just not wait. It's done. It's finished. Let's just put it out there. Because we just thought you didn't even have to be a Cagney fan, because if you like the golden years, there's a lot of actors he talks about and things, and you learn a lot about him because there's a lot in there that he talks about we never heard of, because he was a very private man. He would never talk about anybody or even himself. Mm-hmm. So Bill got a lot out of him, and I used to say that to him. I go, you got a lot out of him. They had a very special connection, those two, from the start. Mm-hmm. And Bill, he said of all the celebrities he had met throughout his 50 years, 60 years, he was with the Cal Burnett Show and The Odd Couple. He had a special bond with Jim. And you could see how easy it is with him. That's the type of man he was, Now,
is Bill still with us?
No, actually, he passed 3 months after the book was published. So he got to read it and he loved it, because I used to call him up and say, Bill, we're doing this. I want to read you this or show you this. And he'd say, stop calling me, because I don't want anything to do with this. He said, show me the book. So I'd call him up and, he would just kid around. And I was like, okay, but you're the author. I have to get, I want to make sure we're doing the right thing, and get permission, and stop calling me. So,
but did he have a physical copy in his hand to see the finished product? Wow.
Yeah.
But no, he thought it was great.
Yeah.
Well, it is.
He couldn't believe it.
Yeah, he was shocked. Like, he probably thought, I don't know. I would take pictures of where I was to show him the work. And he'd go, geez, that's a lot of work. I mean, 3 months, it was nonstop. I'd wake up, go to bed. I mean, it was just nonstop. And it was fun. I've never done anything like this in my life. And maybe because I knew the subject so well. Richard, it was pretty easy. If you said, let's do a book on John Wayne, I don't know if I could do it. But
obviously, I believe firmly that once you find your passion,
Mhm.
if you are committed, doors are going to open for you.
Yeah.
So, what was the process of the three of you working together?
It was communication. We Stone lived in Canada, so I had to get international calling to call him because we didn't always email. We wanted to talk to one another sometimes right away.
Yeah, three-way conversations a lot of times.
Yeah, we would do that, and we're constantly. It was like it was a dream team. We worked really well together. We never fought. We never disagreed. We never. It just was like everything just went into place. And
And we're all three of us were fans.
yeah.
What was, I mean, was there ever with either of you an aha moment where you learned something about who he was, the man, aside from his body of worth, as I
Mm.
like to call it, the work that he put out? Was there something for both of you that really jumped out at you that you thought was an aha moment with the book that a lot of people did not know about James Cagney?
Want me to go?
Yeah.
I think, well, his honesty, his warmth, his humbleness, everybody pretty much knew a lot about that. Not everybody, but
Mhm.
I think the way he was with his family. I mean, you talk about, you know, growing up at that time, his father had passed and he took the role. He wasn't even the oldest. He sacrificed a lot for his brothers to go to med school and gave whatever, he wanted to be an artist or whatever. He worked 3 jobs. I think just the way he was with his family, really tight. Nothing bothered them. Nothing came between them. His mother, and just like for me, I don't want to say the Italian families were very close. It's just our nature. We hug, we kiss, I was always touching you. I was like, I just, but it was just, I mean, there was a lot of moments in there about his dad that we didn't know about. I mean, we knew he was, he drank, but he said more things about him in Blackwell Island, and which was incredible. And his wife, of course, was always
That's
in
what I
the
was going to
background.
say. His wife was always
Yeah.
wanted to be in the background. She never wanted the limelight at all.
Hmm.
I mean, and this book shed a little more light on her because she's in the book, a big part of it.
Yeah.
So we got to see a little bit about her personality, more of her personality. And and sometimes she'll say, "Oh, don't write this. I don't want anybody reading it." Like she didn't want to say anything she wasn't supposed to say,
Mhm.
you know. But we found out a lot more about her as
So,
well,
as you
about their years together, their early years together. Um,
right,
that was hard for them, and they were on the road constantly in vaudeville, and just trying to make ends meet. They first married, and they had to just perform and go on the road, and so that was hard.
But that was his favorite time. He didn't like the movies.
No, right,
He did,
exactly.
well, Warner Brothers, it was a match for him. Jack Warner and Jim were a perfect match, but they hated each other.
well,
So,
Bill says in the book that early on that as he was getting these laser disc, remember those? As he was getting these and watching these films with James,
Watching the movies with him during when he was interviewing him when he's staying, at the house, and he hadn't seen any of them.
exactly.
He had not seen a lot of these movies ever,
yeah,
Can you
and Bill couldn't believe it.
imagine?
Bill
Yeah.
couldn't believe it that he cried. He was actually crying, but he had never seen some of them.
yeah.
Wow.
Only the dancing parts. Like he'll watch Yankee Doodle Dandy or Full Light Parade, but only the dancing parts. Like he didn't really. He didn't. I don't know. He just didn't. It was a job to him. He went in. He did his thing and he came home to his wife. He wasn't a partier like Frank McHugh and Pat O'Brien. They were very close. They would go to each other's house. You know, Jim wasn't a drinker and he wasn't a partier. He wasn't a schmoozer like a lot of people had to be to work. He could care less, you know, which was, he had that attitude.
Yeah,
Even
so not Hollywood.
yeah, he was far from it.
So I
Well,
think
Donna
that's
Singh said that he was one of the most famous actors that she ever worked with. And, you know, and I don't, in terms of everything that I know about Cagney, I don't think he was ever involved in a scandal or anything that, you know, a lot of actors end up just by being in the room when it happens.
yeah.
He was so far removed from all of that.
Well, you know, he went to one party and left. He saw what was going on. But well, there was a communist thing because, you know, he was a Democrat and, you know, he was donating and he didn't know that, you know, the Communist Party at the time, you know, was taking the money. He didn't know where the money was going.
Mhm.
So Jack Warner was mad about that. You know, he told you not to do that, but, you know, he always defended the little guy, you know, the Scottsboro boys. He knew what was going on and he sent them a check to his lawyer. I mean, there was a lot of things that, you know, he stood up for and he believed in it.
Well, I want to ask you, I mean, he is very much a product of 1930s and 40s films when the studios ruled everything. The studios basically decided what films you were going to be doing, the projects, all of that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask, how proactive was James Cagney in terms of charting out his own career?
Well, I think in the beginning, he had a rude awakening of what was going on as far as the money. He was getting paid $400 a week. Edward G. Robinson was getting $50,000 because he had an 8-year contract because he was in silent films and it lapsed over, and he saw what was going on, and he got his brother to be his manager, which he was probably just as tough too. And they fought Jack for new contracts constantly. And if he didn't like it, he'd walk out. But he said he'd never walk out in the middle of a film or anything like that. It was always when the film was done, he wouldn't come back for the next one. He wanted to be paid, and rightfully so, you know.
Yeah.
And was he a smart businessman in terms of managing his money and everything, or did he surround himself with the right people who took care of that?
No, I definitely think he was smart about business wise. Oh, definitely. I think he would think the same thing. I think his brother did well by him.
Yeah, Bill was very smart with business minded. They always say, you know, he made more money than Jim did at the end of his career with real estate, because that's what they invested in, was real estate. And so, yeah, he had his brother, and he trusted him.
Now, I'm all about celebrating, so I don't talk about negative things on this show. So this is the question I'm going to ask for both of you is a celebratory question. But out of all the books and things that have been written about him, what are your favorites and why?
Of all the books,
Yes.
it has to be Cagney by John McCabe. That would be the definitive biography, I would have to say. And John McCabe, as a lot of fans know, was his ghostwriter for his autobiography in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
And McCabe came out with the biography in, I think, 1997. And that was fabulous. It's fabulous. It's a 400 and something page. It had all the stuff that should have been in his autobiography, and that's what John McCabe did. He put all that stuff that was supposed to be in his autobiography that Jim didn't want, you know, or felt, you know, the need to have it, and not a tell-all book, and put a lot of it in that, and it's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's, I think, my favorite publication.
Mhm.
If it's a biography.
Okay. Dayna, and I'm going to assume that you probably feel the same way.
I mean, I loved Cagney by Cagney. I read it so many
Mhm.
times. The binder is in like 5 parts. And when I went up to see him, I was thinking about bringing that book, and I said, "Oh my God, it's in pieces." And what is he going to say? Not thinking, okay, I should go to the bookstore and get a new book. I just didn't want him to see it just in shambles because I used it as research. I mean, it was used constantly. And his ghostwriter, John McCabe, wrote another book, which Lisa talked about. And it's got a lot of stuff in it because Jim always said his book was a hop, skip, and a jump. He didn't want to talk about people. He didn't want to talk about himself. He was actually really forced to do his bio because Pat O'Brien said, if you don't do it, someone else does. And there were a few out there that were really, there were a lot of errors. And he actually sued a couple of the writers, and
Mhm.
it was public domain, so it didn't happen. But he finally got it together and he wrote it. But there's a lot missing. Like you can read it and go, there should be more to it, but that's the way he was. He didn't want to talk about things like that.
Yeah, people would be bored with it. People be bored if you start to talk about.
He thought, like, who would want to know about my life? Like, there's nothing special. You should be
Well,
writing
speaking
about
of
a
which,
psychologist or something that saves people or something. Like he didn't think he was. He was just an actor that did his job and went home. And that was it.
Yeah.
well, obviously, this next question that I'm going to ask is speculation, because, but based on who both of you are, based on all that you've done and all that you've accomplished when it comes to Cagney, how do you think he would feel about, if he was around today, your Facebook page, number one, and number two, this musical Cagney with Robert Creighton?
Well, I think the first thing he would do is cry. He was that type of person. He was very sensitive. The musical, I think he would have loved. Um, the page, he would have laughed, and the book even. I think he would have loved the book because that was something that he didn't finish. He was working on it, and he was really into it, and it helped him as far as his health too. It gave him something to do, and because he was 83 at the time,
Mhm.
and I think he would just smile and just either he would be happy about it,
It's
and
very
think about
interesting.
it. You know.
Last week, I had Lawrence Schulman on the show, and he's written a couple of books about Judy Garland. And Judy Garland has a very unique fan base. And he
Mhm.
actually talked about the fandom. Judy had this ability that everybody felt that they wanted to protect her or that they feel ownership of her.
Mhm.
Um, how would you, in blanket terms, obviously, describe the quote or quote unquote average Cagney fan? Or is there such thing as an average Cagney fan?
Mm.
I don't. I don't really think so. You're in or out, or
Okay.
you're learning. Oh, I saw
Yes.
pictures. Maltese.
Yes, he's a Maltese. Yes.
Yeah, they get very attached to their owners.
Yes.
Um,
So you tend to find older people. I not to be, but older people who know who Cagney is, they're like, oh, Jimmy Cagney, he was the best.
yeah,
It's that's your big fan base.
yeah. Even like parents, they knew who he was. They went to his movies, and my dad always commented about his hair. He had great hair, and
So I got to talk to my grandparents who were married in the 30s, and when I was a fan when my grandparents were alive, and they got to tell me when they went to the movies and they saw all those movies.
yeah,
Well,
but
I
They
can
were
only
like, oh, they were
imagine.
big fans, big fans.
I
yeah,
mean, the three of us can only imagine what it must have been like in the 1930s when he was so hot, that waiting for the next Cagney film to come out.
oh
I
my God,
remember how excited I was in the 80s when
right
Ragtime
now,
came out.
yes. Oh,
Oh, both of us. We were talking about that the other day too.
It
We
was
got to see him on the screen in ragtime. The first only movie, him being alive, and we're fans at the time.
it was a dream. Yeah. My mom and my aunt came to the city when it premiered. We went down the city. My mom says, "You sure you want to go to the city?" I was like, "Yes." We were in line. Oh my God. It was just, and when he came on, everybody was screaming and yelling. You couldn't even hear the words. And we're almost like, shh, quiet, we can't hear. And we had to see it again because we couldn't, he was drowned out with the applause was amazing.
But the minute we waited, because it took he wasn't in the movie a lot until
Right.
towards the end.
Towards the end.
And we went, that's the only reason that I went to see the movie.
That's what took me, with all due respect to Dr. O, it was James Cagney being on the screen again.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine was an extra on that film, and she's long gone, but she had photographs of the two of them together. And I don't even know where those photographs ended up.
Oh, great.
Oh,
yeah. No, yeah. That was a great experience.
That was wonderful. I wish he had done something right after that instead of waiting. When he did Terrible Joe Moran, which to me was a mistake. He was not well, and being Jim who he was, he said he promised, and he was going to do the film, but he wasn't well.
I cannot believe that we're at the end of the show, because I could go on for 2 hours with both of you, but I always like to be respectful of my guest time and the audience's time. And I'm going to give each of you a chance to have your final word today. It could be about anything that we spoke about that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any final message you want to leave everyone with. I'm going to give my final word, then I'll turn it over to you, Lisa, and then Dayna, you'll have the final word. And when you say goodbye, I will end the show, so you don't have to worry about how this is going to end. I'll take care of it. But everyone, please get this book. The holidays are coming up. It is available on Amazon.com, but what I like to do is I like to encourage everyone to call your favorite bookseller and ask if it's on their shelves.
Yes.
And if it's not on their shelves, then tell them they should get it. And then call your local library and find out if they have a copy of it, because it should be there as well. I end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the fifth name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, but a phone call. And let that person know the impact that they've had on their life. But before that conversation is over, ask them what their favorite James Cagney film is. Then order 2 copies of this. Keep one for yourself and send one to that fifth friend that you're all going to call tonight. And let's get this book into as many hands as possible.
Fantastic.
I have a dear friend, and he says we're all in the same storm, but we're in different sized boats. And I always say, I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you have a skipper by your side. And with that, I'm going to leave the screen. And Lisa, it's yours. And I hope you'll both come back.
Oh, yes. We'd love to, Richard. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. And we hope to get maybe younger people to read about classic movies or see classic movies, just like we grew up on, and maybe they'll read the book and find something out new that they didn't know about.
When Cagney opens on Broadway, we'll do a celebration with Robert, and I'll have you back.
Oh,
that'd be great.
Yeah, we love Robert.
We love him. Yeah,
all yours.
All right, you go, Lise.
No, I did. You go. It's your turn.
I think tonight was great. As far as the younger generation, I had a tattoo of cat. Where am I? Over here. Oh, I can't get it on screen. Anyway, right there you go. He that was the first autograph that he sent, and I had it tattooed. I was in the tattoo parlor. There was younger, 20s or something, and I said, James Cagney is, and they were like, no, and they actually went to Google him, and they're like, how do you spell Cagney? And I was like, oh my God, like these kids, they're on their phones, and the old black and whites, they're such great movies. It doesn't have to be a Cagney movie. I mean, the stories, the directors, it's just, you can cry, you can laugh. It's just, get to watch those movies, bring them back. It's like, our generation, we love them, my parents, my grandparents, but the younger generation is missing out just because they're black and white. Don't think that they're not good. They're excellent, So that's what I would say is turn on the TV for once and sit down and they're usually short movies, and watch these movies. That really will bring you joy. Did to me my whole life. I found a man who pretty much changed my life and introduced me to so many people I love and call brother and sister. I mean, it can change your life. So I hope you watch the Tube.